Alright, what is poppin', people? We're back. And now look, we're at week 6 of SCL, so we got 3 more weeks of the regular season to go. And by this point, we're starting to get the playoff picture for the teams kind of figured out. Now, do I know what the playoff picture looks like? No, not really. I haven't paid that kind of attention to anything at SCL. I'm mostly just looking at, okay, who's playing, who's succeeding, and then, like, you know, meta-related trends. But because we're at this point in the season, right, you're gonna see maybe some player substitutions that aren't this. Okay, this is my opinion. Maybe this isn't actually how the managers think, but this is how I view it, right? You may see some player subs that aren't necessarily because someone's underperforming, but it's more just like get someone time, you know, give someone exposure in the tournament. You know, if you got a team that's locked to playoffs and doesn't really care about their seeding, maybe they, you know, let their bench player for a certain tier in. And I think you also get some people more willing to experiment a little bit more as the tournament goes on. Because, well, if you're guaranteed playoffs, why not see if some maybe wackier stuff can work out? Anyhow, do we see any of that this week? Honestly, I couldn't tell you. At least not with regards to subs. I will say, I do think there are some, based on some of the games that I watched, I do think there were some interesting sets / team compositions going on. Maybe we can talk a little about those as we get to it. But first game, Sensei Axu versus Hoenn confirmed. Now, Hoenn confirmed, a little bit of a slide right now. If I'm remembering correctly, he came into this game on a 2-game losing streak after starting off 3-0. So, obviously he's trying to get some momentum back on his side, and in my eyes, he loaded up a team that he probably is pretty comfortable with. It is very aggressive offense. When I think of Sand and NU, right, you know, I think of the team that I best aim when he did his NU battling thing a while ago. You know, more of a Sand balance type, where you take advantage of a whole bunch of the pivots that NU has that have really good defensive synergy with, say, Gigalith. So, like, Dragalge, maybe Pivot Starmie, Rotom Mo, etc. Hoenn has opted for a much more aggressive build. You're seeing maybe a Scarf Rotom Mo, a, you know, Nasty Plot Salazzle, you know, just set up overload, essentially, because, you know, hey, you got a Blastoise. Not really a mon that I would expect to see on Sand. And then you've got Sensei Axu's team, which I think is kind of interesting for the Machamp. You know, obviously Machamp is a mon that's been lambasted much of this generation, for NU at least, as just not worth running. You know, you look at it in comparison to the other fighters, Toxicroak and Surfetch'd, I guess, primarily, if you're going to look at the other wall-breaking fighting types. And you have to ask yourself, English, what does Machamp actually offer over them? You know, I feel like a lot of times the answer is not a whole lot, because Surfetch'd has the raw power, Toxicroak, there's certain mons that it actively just shuts down by being on a team, Vaporeon being the most prominent of them. I think Machamp, if you're looking at what it gives a team, it really just comes down to guts, and how, compared to the other fighters, primarily Surfetch'd, I would say in this regard, is that it doesn't require Heal Bell support, just for that Talonflame insurance. And I guess even to a lesser extent, Vileplume. Machamp can always throw off its attacks. It doesn't care if those mons come in and threaten status, and a lot of the time it's already been statused by its Flame Orb by the time they try to do anything anyway. And I've even theorized a little bit, you know, maybe Assault Vest has some niche, because, you know, we got Sylveon and Vaporeon, both two very adequate Wish Passers, and Machamp's just general bulk should allow it to soft check, you know, some slew of special attackers. So I think there's some potential there. Anyhow, as we get into this game, you know, you're looking at the Silvally. Probably going to be Silvally Ground because, again, it's the best one. So it's a pretty, you know, this isn't like pre-DLC India where you had to maybe play a little bit of a guessing game with what the Silvally was, because there were like 5 or 6 really good ones. It's like, there's Silvally Ground, and then there's a huge fall-off, and then you're looking at, like, Steel and Ghost and Fairy. It's like the only other really conceivably viable ones. But if you're also looking at what does a Silvally Ground offer this team, well, It's another rock resist, because Machamp and Croak don't really count as those, I wouldn't say. They can take like one hit, but afterwards, not looking too good. Of course, Machamp, if you're looking at it versus the most prominent of the rock types in Tyrantrum, yeah, you're just slower, so have fun. But I also think Silvally Ground benefits a good bit from Croak threatening things like Mudsdale. And in both, just Machamp and Croak obviously apply a lot of offensive pressure versus any physical wall that maybe could kind of slow down Silvally Ground. And hey, it's a Volt blocker. Is it one that beats Rotom Mow? Not at all. But it helps. I honestly, this is one of the games I did watch over a little bit. When I'm looking at preview, I do just generally favor Sensei Axie's positioning a little bit. I do think the Sandslash could be a little bit of an issue. I need to remember what this thing's speed is. Okay, so 229. Yeah, that's faster than Scarf Rotom Mow. Right. 298. Yes, that is. Sand Rush. Okay, yeah, we're good. So, Adamant Sandslash still faster than that. And in general is just, like, you know, if it ever finds a chance to Sword Stance up, it's kind of doomed. I guess you would say the response to that the response to that would be, okay, where do you find a chance to set up? Because there's not really a lot of good ones. If I'm remembering right, this is Life Orb, so I mean, Talon can status it. I guess you'd maybe try to set up versus Diancie and just hope that it's not a, like, Moonblast set. You know, if it's like Diamond Storm Body Press, you'd be okay into it. The main issue with that hope is there's a Machamp, so I don't think he'd be Heal Bell. And, you know, even Toxicroak helps to give your team a just very good Scald switch-in, so not even that's really forcing you to want the Cleric, so. Don't love preview from Hoenn, but maybe the Rotom Mow can do something, we'll see. Now, as we see the lead, Rotom Mow leads out versus Ground Valley, as we thought. And I think part of this comes down as well to, there's not a lot that he wants to lead into a potential Ground Valley. But mostly Rotom Mow doesn't really care about anything on Sensei's team. You know, even if it's Gale Wings Talon, you're not getting KO'd by Brave Bird. Machamp, I mean, you Volt versus as it goes for whatever attack. Maybe even you just leave Storm and get off a huge hit before Guts comes into play. Croak, you've got answers too. Diancie, okay. I'm going Blast Wizard smashing the next turn. So it's just a generally good lead. You can guarantee yourself some early momentum, more or less. And he is going to make the hard double into Gigalith there. Just expecting one of the two switch-ins to Leaf Storm to come out here. I guess 1 to 3 if you count Croak there. But I don't think you'd ever go Croak. I think Motum is pretty much the generally safe mid-ground covering a Volt or a Leaf Storm. And his next turn's decent progress for both players. Hoenn gets his rocks up. The main worry is this thing, and here was actually a very interesting set. Now, yeah, that dies in one hit. Guts Machamp is still strong. But I remember when I was watching this replay, I was trying to figure out why he was Air Balloon instead of even just, like, Boots. And the main answer to that I came to was, oh, look at his team. He's switching to good, like, offensive ground types. I mean, regardless, Golurk, you know, it's claiming kills versus his team. He doesn't have a switch, and I don't expect this kind of team to have one unless you say, I'm content with my speed control outside of sand being, like, you know, combination of Lazzle and, a Cellarrock on Lycanroc. You know, maybe then you go itemless on Rotom Mow, and you have that. But in terms of your switch-ins to just ground-type moves, it's like, it's not very good. You know, I was thinking maybe Hoenn's thought process was, if I am reliant entirely on Rotom Mow to switch into a ground-type move, that leaves me very, very vulnerable to a Silvally Ground late game, which does have opportunities to set up versus his team, right? I mean, Gigalith can boom versus it, if it has it, I guess. But since Rotom Mow is scarfed, obviously, if Ground Valley comes in on a Volt ever, then that's a free turn to go for Sword Stance. And once that thing Sword Stance is up, what's Hoenn doing? You know, if it's SD Flame Charge, he loses off on the spot. So I think it's mostly just, I think it's him trying to give himself a little bit more room to play around the strong, like, moves like, you know, Ground Valley's multi-attack, Golurk's Earthquake. And also because, I mean, if you just don't care about boots, then it's like, what other item are you running at that point anyway, right? Sash is literally useless, as we said. He's got sand. Life Orb on a Mon is going to take sand damage on a sand team. It's not that it's unviable, it's just that it is really compromising how many turns you get. You know, simple math real quick, right? So if you have Life Orb over 2 turns, you have taken 30% plus under sand. Whereas if you were just running that outside of a sand team, you know, you'd only be taking 20. So it's adding on extra recoil very, very quickly. So I think it partly just came down to Hoenn saying, yeah, this is... there aren't really a whole lot of other better options. And now, Talon comes out versus Sandslash. We're going to see a very, very lucky dodge here from Sensei on the rock slide. Oh no, that comes later. Okay. No, babe. Was this the turn I was thinking of? Fuck. No, I'm forgetting already. I watched this replay when I was really tired, so it's not doing me any favors. But Hoenn obviously does not get hit by the burn, and he is going to stay in an Earthquake. Again, I think part of this is just respecting Silvally Ground's threat level. And since he has sand turns, he's not worried if it flame charges or swords dances, he'll still be faster with Sandslash. And yeah, I mean, his only real ground switching at this point is the Rotom Mow. So it's pretty reasonable to expect Sensei to try to catch it if he just wants to, like, immediately up the threat level. And we're going to see the Rotom dump its Scarf off. Hoenn saying, like, okay, in this game, Scarf Rotom Mow isn't overly necessary. Lycanroc plus Sandslash with Sand support should be enough. Which, yeah, I can kind of vibe with, I think. I mean, Lycanroc under Sand is pretty threatening at this point, because he got the chip off on this. I think the main worry is just going to be, you know, you don't KO Diancie. Machamp is still at a high enough amount of health. And it has Bullet Punch, which is going to do a million. I doubt that straight Oko's Lycanroc, just because BP is non-stab and really weak, but it's going to do a lot. And if he's Life Orb, then, you know, immediately it just doesn't have turns left. And same deal with, like, Croak's Sucker Punch. It's going to do a lot. And even though Lycan can KO you with Psychic Fangs in return, if he has it, it doesn't really matter. You know, Machamp's going to come out versus the Rotom Mow. And Hoenn's going to Volt on out. Seeing that Volt damage, I think Leaf Storm may have actually killed. Volt's 70, Leaf Storm's like 130. Yeah, no, Leaf Storm definitely blew this boy back. Right? It's not exactly double. It's a little bit less than double. It's 195. Turn and stab versus 105. It might have been a roll for Leaf Storm to KO. Regardless, he did go Stoys, and that immediately drops. And I mean, he's not really got a great turn, I guess, to set up with Blastoise is his thought there. Although I do think maybe versus Talonflame you could have looked for a Shell Smash, and you will outspeed Scarf Rotom Mow. Won't Oko Croak, and maybe, you know, so he may not be random Earthquake, I guess, which is for the best. Make no mistake, that is for the best. Anyhow, Sandslash comes out, and obviously still going to be slower. He hits this Rock Slide, so he gets rid of the Talon, but that doesn't really matter too much, I don't think. It's like, realistically, Talon versus this team, it's not doing a whole lot. And he's going to rock up versus the Rotom Mow, as the Silvally Ground U turns out. And he's going to boom versus this Rotom Mow as well. So, I mean, look, it's still pretty doomed at this point. And we are going to see Sensei X actually gunk shot the Lycanroc there. I think regardless, you're in a pretty safe spot, because if he's CB, there's no move he's locking into that you're overly worried about. Right? Like, and you also always have this. So, like, if he's CB, Machamp will be able to probably revenge kill with some combination of, like, Machamp plus Diancie, I imagine. If he locks into Psychic Fangs, then Diancie just immediately would be what comes out, I guess. Locks into CC, same thing. Again, this all contingent on the Machamp calc. I'm not overly worried about finding out what that is right now. And if anyone's, you know, wondering why he went for Gunk as opposed to his fighting move, My guess would be that he's low kick, and I don't know what low kick's power is versus Lycan, but I'm not going to assume it to be very high. Lycanrock's pretty pretty light. So Egonks, the poison's also really good, as this ends up being revealed to be Life Orb Lycanrock. So he only gets this one attack off and dies to poison damage the next turn. And last Monroe to Mo, he did trick away the lefties. Or not the lefties. No, the lefties. He tricked away the lefties from Hoenns. So regardless, I'm assuming Silvally Ground would have been able to just U-turn twice versus this and win. Also, Mystical Fire Diancie being revealed last, which is pretty cool. And actually ends up eating this Leaf Storm from full. I already knew Diancie could chew a leaf from full from unboosted Rotom mode, but to see it also chew up a +1, Leaf Storm was pretty interesting. And yeah, next game, yeah, this was an interesting one. We do see a continued theme of these Frostlass Spikes offense teams in NU, which is pretty cool to see. I'm wondering if it'll change the narrative of who the best spiker is in NU going forward, because I think I know, for several months now, most people have pretty much just said, yeah, Garbodor defines what it means to be a spiker in NU. Which isn't a particularly high bar, because Garbodor isn't a particularly incredible Pokemon, but it's still been viewed as the best option for spikes if you want it. But as the meta's moved a little bit past the teams you'd see Garb on, it's fallen off. And now we see some of these more offensive builds of Frostlass popping up in SCL, so I think that's pretty cool. Rechon has a Kadabra on his team, so immediately I'm kind of unsure what that means. You know? And I mean, on Arceus's team is just... It's some sort of balancy build, I think. It's still kind of offensive in nature, but I would still probably call this balance. It's like some mixture between offense and balance. Like, I don't know, man. It doesn't really matter too much. If we're looking at a Pokemon on Arceus' team, though, that I'm pinning as a threat, it's going to be the Kingdra. I think Kingdra can maybe set up versus Lazzle, depending on what its set is. That would be a problem. Depending what the Kadabra is as well, I mean, maybe Kingdra Agilities versus that. I don't know what Kadabra runs. It's Kadabra. Yeah, we're going to see Whimsy versus Last Lead. We already know what the Last is going to do. You just try to get its spikes up as early as possible. Icy Wind there always makes the most sense, because you'll outspeed whatever comes in afterwards and still guarantee a spike. This just also guarantees you a little bit of chip. And we're going to see these Stoys come in immediately after. Instead of smashing, he does go for an Ice Beam. Now, my guess as to why he didn't go for Smash is maybe he was worried about Whimsicott, like, hard coming out there. He could also have been worried about, like, if he Shell Smashes and doesn't KO Kingdra, what if that comes out in Agilities or something? Let's actually go back. I want to remember what position we were at that led to this play. So Talonflame Flare Blitzes, he goes Blastoise there. And now we're on turn 3. He Ice Beams after the Brave Bird instead of Shell Smashing. I mean, yeah, you don't Oko everything left on his team. I'm mostly just trying to think to myself, is there anything on Arceus' team that if Stoys smashes here, could then come in afterwards and cost him the game there for smashing? I mean, even if he roosts, and was Gale Wings, right? He wouldn't get enough health back. I mean, my guess would be Ground Valley again, just because it's the best Soul Valley in the tier. And I don't see you going Fairy Valley plus Whimsicott. I don't see you going Steel Valley plus Bronzong. I guess it could be a Soul Valley Ghost, but I don't think that's great outside of Spikes, frankly. I'm really trying to figure out why he didn't smash there versus Talon. He could have been worried about... I mean, even if he's worried about Toxic, I don't think that matters too much. Right, because you smash, he may Toxic you. But... no, you would definitely still smash even if you thought Toxic was coming out. That's not at all a point. Maybe he... so he Ice Beams, right? Maybe he's worried that this Whimsicott's gonna, like, hard come out here if he smashes and be, Encore. That's really my best guess. And it makes some amount of sense, because I think otherwise... I think that's really the only reason. Unless you also just wanted to kill Talon. If you value getting rid of Talonflame. Because of, these three mons all being kind of kept down by it. I think that, too, would explain why he just wanted to make sure this mon was gone that turn. Anyhow. So Valley U-turns, Decidueye comes out, Decidueye Leaf Blades a Whimsicott, and it stays in. Also, there's real Koba Berry, which is pretty funny. Nice little anti-Talonflame little tech there. And Whimsicott also does end up being Memento, which... yeah... yeah, now Kingdra gets to come in. And we're only going to see him Agility. He doesn't go for the Focus Energy as well, because there is the risk of a crit. But what ends up being really funny is that Kadabra lives. Unfortunately, he gets to Agility again. And it doesn't matter. Oh my lord. Now, I will say I did watch this game, so I played a little bit off, like I didn't know what this Kadabra set was. Also, this man gets really lucky with some of these paras, I will say. He needed one more to end up winning this game, because he was, I'm guessing Boots and the Lazzle here? But, yeah. I mean, this is just a very weird game. Both teams are not standard at all. I mean, this is standard in the sense that Spike's Frost... it's really just the Kadabra that makes this team look a little less standard, right? You know, maybe you'd see... I don't know what mon you'd replace Kadabra with here. Maybe a Xatu. Just to support, like, Sash on Lazzle. I could see that. And honestly, I do think Whimsicott's an interesting pick. It's not that I think it's necessarily very good. But I mean, Fast Memento is definitely a niche. So, it works well here too, because dual screen's falling off really hard. Kingdra kind of needed, I think, Kingdra's fallen off in large part because of dual screens not being good anymore. It's much harder to get both boosts. And so, having that mon that can guarantee you at least one of them pretty safely, usually force a switch from your opponent. Maybe you can tank whatever hit from them is thrown your way and then boost again. I think that's not too bad. Anyhow, next game. TDK versus MNCMT. Now, our little lad on the left has brought a very tried and true core. I feel like I've seen these 5 Pokemon with an, like, itemless Ninjask far too many times. I'm tired of it, honestly. But this is one of the most standard ways, I think, to support itemless Ninjask. You get Magic Bounce. One of these two, it's like Silvally Steel versus Rotom-Mow. One of them will have Defog. Rock's Diancie generally ends up being the best rocker alongside it, just because, you know, you got a Silvally Steel. You probably aren't going Rock's Raja, and in Bronzong, I feel, is just kind of maybe not the best mon. On this kind of build that's a lot more offensive, you wouldn't want a Bronzong. I think Diancie fits those a little bit better. And it's Sneasel here because it applies a good amount of pressure to Diancie, which otherwise is, you know, not being broken through a Ninjask. And it still also, you know, threatens things like Bronzong. Can pressure a Scavalier, which sure Ninjask beats from a higher threshold than like some of the other steals. Still nice to have something that could maybe force the knock onto it early, if that's your opponent's way of responding. Potentially knock a Talonflame, which is really good, to let Ninjask beat that later on. It just generally has pretty good offensive synergy with Ninjask. And of course, it too benefits from the Zatu's plus other removal option core going on here, because it lets you run an item like, say, Choice Band, or maybe even Wide Lens if you're running SD Triple Axle. And in TDK's team, we see another Articuno showing from him. His team is interesting. That's my first thought when I look at his team. It's just like, damn, that's interesting. This is one of the games I haven't watched at all, just for the record there. I mean, it's hard for me to say what anything would be running. I mean, I'm inclined to believe that this would maybe be like Wish Toj. Well, that doesn't have to be, right? I mean, it could be like Rox Diancie's Scarf on this. Random, like, non-Scarf item on this. Maybe this is, Rock Polish. Maybe it's like Growth. I don't know. Let's just see what's going on here, man. Let's see what TDK built up. So we do see this is a Sylvali Steel. Honestly has a really good matchup into TDK's team as well. I don't know if it would be running a more offensive EV spread. I'd guess yes, and then you just rely on the combination of it and Diancie's typings to handle maybe what this one wants to check defensively, i.e. Dragon types. But yeah, even just offensively, like multi-attack goes really hard versus this team. And if this is Swords Dance, maybe, and like say this is maybe like, I was gonna say Scarf Defog. I don't know if you need a Scarfer with the Jask plus Sneasel, but still an option. But it could definitely be a problem. Seeing seeing Parting Shot makes me think that this probably isn't Swords Dance. I think if you wanted a pivot move, you'd go U-turn with Swords Dance. We're gonna see the Sneasel brought in here, and we're gonna also get to see it just get a free knockoff. And that does 38 to the Articuno, and now he's gonna Axle, so we know he's probably Wide Lens, I'd guess. I don't think you need to run Boots if you've got this much hazard support, or hazard control support for Ninjask. And we're gonna see the remote come in on that. Togedemaru is gonna be a very easy answer. And we see a U-turn there. Doesn't tell us if the Rat is a Wish variant or not. And right now we're just gonna see TDK keep him and CMT looped up. There's not much he can do to break this. But the lefties reveal is important. You now know this is more of a specially defensive variant with Wish. I mean, yeah, again, he actually is going to go hard Ninjask and get Stone Edged immediately for it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not like Stone Edge is really low drawback anyway. We don't know if he's Choice Banded or not, because these do run Spell Tag a fair bit. But Stone Edge is really low drawback, because what's switching into Golurk anyway, right? You know, the Rock Resist is Sylvali Steel. And, I mean, he switched it out from the Golurk. So, you know, it's immediately not an option to switch in. I guess he could have stayed in, but it's like, and do what? If he's a Bolt, like, if this Sylvali Steel isn't just straight up max attack, I'm not sure that it 2-hit KOs Golurk with a multi. So if he goes Diancie, it's like, okay, that's fine. You now have to hope, though, that he is CB, which you'll see off the damage, but if he's not CB, then you still have another, you know, 50-50 on your hands between, oh, am I gonna Earthquake the Diancie now, or am I gonna, you know, go for Stone Edge or Ice Punch or whatever coverage for flying types I have there? So that was a really good read by TDK. And now he's gonna sack the Articuno to the, what's it called, to the Sneasel. He's also played this Diancie very well. I mean, he's got Togedemaru plus Diancie, so the Ninjask wouldn't have ever made too much progress anyway. But it is cool to see him keep the health up on it. And also, Diancie is just important for TDK to keep around, to keep the Sneasel in check still at this point. So you're going to see him go to... that is a Custat Berry Vileplume. Excuse me, sir? I don't even know what that's supposed to do! They didn't even reveal a move. What the hell does this mean? What does Custat Vileplume mean? Okay, well... the Vileplume's dead. Also, this could be Iron Tail, I guess, if you want to be a pessimist. So, sure. Play the Diancie really safely. And the Golurk comes out again versus the Sylvali. At this point, I mean, Poltergeist is very free. Once you get rid of the Ninjask, you essentially get to click that move repeatedly, with no worry. And now he's finally going to go to the DNC here. At this point, he doesn't really need to be too worried about it because Golurk is going to get to consistently come in versus both the Steel Valley Steel and the DNC and just do damage. So he gets to play this game out from here pretty just straightforwardly. Tukadamari is going to come out versus the Sneasel. It is not Barbs, which, I mean, yeah, Lightning Rod's pretty hard to justify dropping and Rotom most here. We see the sack there. Heal is going to come out, and yeah, at this point it's going to click Thunderbolt. And it's going to win the game. So, this is a very interesting team from TDK, though. I don't know what Custap on this means. I really don't. But it was a really good play to immediately catch the Ninjask with the Stone Edge. Good shit, good shit. And now we're going to see another Sandcore. I remember watching this game live, and oh god. Oh, I don't want to watch it again. Not because it was a bad game, but because it takes 5 million turns. And wanna know why? Now, a little bit of meta knowledge to be dropped on y'all here, right? So, normally when you see Sylveon plus Vaporeon, what that means a lot of the time is that it's going to be like Specs Sylveon or just some more offensive set, and then Wish Vaporeon. No, Kushalos didn't want to have fun today. He decided he needs 2 Wish Passers. Yeah, so, I'm really excited to watch this game again. Yeah, we're guessing Expulsive with the Escavalier Tech turn 1, just to make sure, you know, see whether or not the Raja has Heat Crash or not. The switch into Talents is probably not, but I don't think you want to hedge your bets on that too early on. Shells could always be just trying to condition you. And we're going to see Vaporeon Scald this, and we're going to see a really lucky burn here. You want to know why? Because this is Life Orb Sheer Force Copper Raja. Oh my lord, if he didn't get the burn, this Vaporeon was being sent 12 years back in time. Oh my lord. It's not overly worrying for Kushalos. He's got Heal Bell on one of these two. Like, he can cleanse the burn. I guess the main thing would just be, it's like, what does Raja come out versus to actually break, right? I mean, Gigalith, I guess. Maybe a Scavalier. Probably a Scavalier, actually, you should be faster than that. But getting it in to safely Wish Pass is not really going to happen at this point. And we're going to see there the Wisp Miss into the Wisp Land, with the rocks going up. Doesn't really matter too much, I don't think. Although now you are, if you're exposed, so maybe wanting to get rid of those rocks. And we're going to see this Bulk Up Talon. Bulk Up Wisp Talon. When we did the Talonflame Spotlight video a while ago, to talk about this as a pretty good set. Maybe not pretty good. It's pretty situational on the teams you can fit it on. Really, only you see it on these bulkier teams that can afford the amount of turns it takes for this Talon to like do what it wants to do, which is cripple everything and then set up 50 bulk ups. And I remember seeing, I think during the discussion of this game, people were actually thinking that maybe Kushalos should have just kept bulking here, right? Like, if you just bulk up to +6, like, does this Gigalith ever beat you? The Rock Blast miss is a little unfortunate for Expulso. Maybe if he gets 5 hits, the Talon dies. Although I'm very... No, there's no way. That is a +2 defense Talon and a burn Gigalith. Never mind. But I do wonder what the calcs look like. You know what? This calc I am interested in. Now, obviously I don't know the EV spreads here. Sure, we'll assume this one. And we say that's burned. This is +2 defense. So, 3 hits, if he is just like this set here. I mean, if he got lucky with his rolls, maybe. Well, this could have also just been toxic, so there is always that risk. And we also do see the Taunt Talon revealed here. I think Taunt Talonflame is a pretty good pick. Especially looking at Expulso's team, it is pretty vulnerable to Iron Defense Bronzong. Since he's Protox Escavalier, he doesn't get to set up alongside it. And Zong kind of otherwise just sets up to +6, and it slowly beats down your whole team while looping in rests. I think that's a really good tech for that this game. Also, of course, going to end up helping slow down to Sylveon. Of course, Sylveon's always going to come in versus Goodra. Now, I do remember, again, while this game was being played, there was some chatter about why run Sylveon plus Vaporeon with both being these utility sets. And essentially, it's because these mons have some pretty decent synergy with each other defensively. Like whether one of them goes Fizdef, the other goes Spidef. They end up generally being able to check a very wide variety of Pokemon. Just like put them together. You know, Vaporeon's able to handle some things like, say, Mudsdale as if it's a top tier breaker. But I mean, yeah, it switches into Mudsdale. We saw Expulse's Vaporeon take on even Life Orb Copper Raja pretty decently. Yes, it did get a burn, but the point is it could still tank the Power Whip. And so you imagine that this Vaporeon could do something similar. Of course, Spidef Sylveon, really good at taking on mons like the Goodra. Even with Iron Tail, you still do check it. In addition to some other Pokemon like Exploud with special defense investment, you're still pretty pressured into wishing a lot versus it, but you do handle it. And I also think that with the more offensive Raj on this team, in case you do run into a Spec Sylveon, which has gotten a little bit of usage lately, it is nice to have that extra line of insurance versus it. And as you may be noting, I'm not talking too much about the battle right now. And a lot of that is just because most of this is just slow war of attrition. You know, we're looking at a game where Expulse's win con is, at this point, very much the Sandslash. And as a little spoiler, Sandslash doesn't end up doing anything for the vast majority of the game also. Yeah, Toxic Vaporeon coming in clutch there. But yeah, it's kind of rough for the Sandslash. I mean, the conditions for it to get the sweep off, one of them is the Mudsdale being crippled in some way, which currently he has satisfied, unless the marker saying it's burned here is just inaccurate. But I mean, he has that satisfied, and then he would also need I don't know how much chip you need on Vapo. I believe he ends up saying he was Lumberry though, after the game. So he would have needed some decent damage of Vaporeon. Yeah, because I remember people saying like, oh, what if you went Sandslash on X turn and Swords Danced up? You know, Life Orb had a good chance to KO Vaporeon from this range. And then, yeah, he said he was lummed to that, so my assumption is just he didn't ever go Sandslash because he didn't really ever get the chance to chip Vapo down enough. And again, we're going to see Vaporeon come in on the turn. Sand goes away, so this Scald is very, very free. At this point, Expulse's team just kind of gets mono 6-0'd by the Vaporeon without his own or Goodra around to switch into it. We're also going to see Kushalos respect the threat of Escavalier toxicking Vapo or knocking its lefties. That's because there's really little reason for him to give Expulso any leeway versus his team at this point. He doesn't need to make that sort of play when he can always just sack the Xatu and then go T-Flame afterwards. And over time, you will see the Vaporeon consistently still be able to come in and throw off those Scalds. There we go, see both players switch in. Mudsdale comes in versus the Escavalier. I think here you just, yeah, again, you switch. And the Escavalier also, like, never breaks Talon. I think you're gonna... Ow, I'm surprised it didn't tech there. Actually, no, I'm not surprised at all, because Toxic on the obvious roost. My bad. My bad, man. You know, Toxic this, I mean, how important is it? I don't think it's overly important at this point. It's still something you like to have done, because, I mean, Sandslash, I guess, appreciates it being pressured. Although, you know, kind of just KO with the rock move anyway, so I guess it's more just you don't want to lose to a bulk up sweep blade. And again, right here we're just going to see this Vaporeon continuously be a nuisance. The Escavalier getting health back, I mean, how much does that really matter? Obviously now it means nothing at all. The Escav being burned here is pretty detrimental to any chance Expulso, I think, had of winning the game. Not because, like, oh, Excavalier was going to, you know, bring this game back and win it, but it was his only mon that actually didn't just die to Skull outright. And here we are going to see the Sandslash come out. And yeah, as we're seeing here, the damage very lacking. If he was at +2 and life orbed, yeah, I think when this mon was at like 82%, that would have KO'd. So I think people are right in wondering about that, especially because the Sandslash, again, we didn't see anything about it until turn 59. But since he ends up being Lumberry, it yeah, it doesn't end up having any threat. And we're actually going to see a very similar team loaded up this game. Confide versus Rob Jr. I mean, look, we got 4 of the 6 same Pokemon right here. Different steel type, and then, I mean, Salazzle plus T-Flame is very uncommon. I feel it's pretty much always one or the other. So it's interesting to see these used on the same team. This feels like a very similar playstyle from preview at least. But I do remember this ends up being a Spec Sylveon, which kind of goes nutty versus Rob's team. Yes, he has the Garbodor, and yes, Vaporeon can sort of keep Spec Sylveon at bay. But it takes very little chip to have Vaporeon really heavily pressured by Sylveon. And I mean, Garbodor, that mon does not run special bulk. So, let's see how this ends up going. I also like Rob Jr.'s team because it is like Tauros Spikes, but assuming this is Scarfro to Mo, it's not as slow. And that's just generally a nice thing. Now, we're going to see this very early knock. And we're going to see Confide say immediately in this game, give me your Garbodor. Give me health. Give me health with this Garbodor. Because this Sylveon can claim kills really easily this game, mostly because there's so much it switches into. And yes, Escavalier, lovely for Confide, you know, it checks Tauros, sort of, I guess it kind of checks Rotom-Mow. It's not a great check, but, you know, it still checks it, and it can KO Deancey. You know what, that's all great things. But Confide instead says, you know what, no. I don't need Escavalier this game, because I have other Pokemon that still do what I would want it to do, and instead I can get this game heavily opened up for my Sylveon. So, you know, if we just look at these things, right? Garbodor's at 40, yep, that dies to Hyper Voice. And Vaporeon at 82, yep. And knocked, yep, no longer can switch into my Hyper Voice. So he's just setting up these conditions to let his Sylveon put in a whole bunch of work. And I don't know what his talent set is. I'd look at this team and think that it's like, it could be SD. Like U-turn SD we've seen a couple of times. It ends up being Defog instead. Which leads me to believe that the idea is Spec Sylveon breaking for the Salazzle. Which we've pretty much got that done and dusted with. I mean, I guess this is still a good amount of health, but I'm sure Sylveon will find a way to kill it at some point this game. Smile. Also, I guess something we could like briefly touch on here. This was actually a Toxic Diancie. I don't think Toxic's a bad move on it. It gives you a little bit better of a time into, say, like Mudsdale and Golurk, and just other ground types in general. Though I do generally find it a little inferior to other potential last slots, Moonblast being probably the most common if you're dropping Heal Bell. When you see Vapo plus Diancie, I do think you can reasonably assume one of them's dropping Heal Bell, because double Heal Bell kind of overkill. It's more just a question of which one it's going to be, and I find a lot of people usually pick it to be Vaporeon that drops it, just so you have a way to free up Toxic as a much easier last slot. Also, again, not much to say about this game, as it's being played out very slowly at this point. I'm mostly just waiting to see the Sylveon come out, and it might be here that it comes out. Actually, Heal Bells. The only reason I thought maybe it would come out there is because, Slipping Guzzlord, you just kind of go into that. But this could also be Rest Talk, and if he was Rest Talk and then, like, rolled a Heavy Slam, that could be pretty rough. We're going to see a Escavalier now right back to full. And, I mean, essentially, he was allowed to make all that progress versus both Garbodor and Vaporeon, and not be punished at all. I mean, sure, Vaporeon is at full again, but that doesn't mean it tanks 2 Hyper Voices from Spec Sylveon. And here it is! I'm guessing he assumes no rest talk because he didn't go for it that one turn. He does end up having it, but yeah, so good night, Garbiter. Sylveon's finally in. And we're gonna see Tauros come out, revenge kill, but why would we let our Sylveon go down? Like, when I say Sylveon claims repeatedly in this game, I mean it. There's not a lot on Rob's team that stops that Mon from getting back in and then saying, okay, give me Pokemon Smile. And we're also going to see, I think, pretty good play from Confide there, too. I mean, Trick is always coming out there from the Rotom-Mow, or Trick or Leaf Storm. I do think staying in is, like, just generally fine. If you value a Scavalier at this point more than you do Mudsdale, then yeah, I think you just stay in and see what the Rotom-Mow wants to do. If he does Trick, it means that you're going to get the Toxic off like you did there. If he Leaf Storms, well, I mean, you could go Sylveon again, which I think you would do, because Salazzle wants this much more weakened than being at full. We're going to see him now actually go to the Scavalier. There's not much reason to keep the Mudsdale in. I do think maybe... Yeah, I know I would at least. It doesn't really matter either way, though. Volt. You can only Volt so many times once you get Toxiced. Now we're going to see the Sylveon now come back out, and we're going to see why getting that knock was so just really valuable. You see that damage? That's big damage. Oh my lord, I feel very low IQ for saying that, but this is what I meant. With Wish Tech and Lefty's healing, sometimes, like, Vaporeon... Now, I think this might be, like, a full Fizz-Dev Vaporeon. I feel like these usually take H-Voice on better. It still's doing, like, around 50, but, again, you're not just actively losing health. This man took 65 from one. Like, normally in these exchanges, you see Sylveon eventually forced out. Because Vaporeon can loop the Wish plus Protect recovery, and eventually just, you know, force you out just due to power points. No. This is like full physically defensive, and so it just dies. Sylveon gets to keep clicking. And we're going to see the Rotom Toxic again. I mean, here again, a Scavalier always gets to come out. Even if you Volt repeatedly versus a Smon, I don't think it gets you too much in the grand scheme of the game. Although it does weaken you for Tauros, so that is something that Confide needs to be cognizant of as we play out this endgame. Vaporeon's going to come out. It does look to be maybe... No, Body Slam definitely 2 it KOs this Vaporeon. It is Spadef. It is a Spadef Vaporeon. Not full Spadef, but like... It's not like full Fizz. Actually, that did less than half. This might be full Fizdef. Although, do you need that? You've got Mudsdale, so whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is, we're just gonna see Confide try his best at this point to play around the Tauros, which ends up just being sacked the Mudsdale. Get the Salazzle in. And at this point, Salazzle also is like pretty easy to win the game with. Deancey's still at full, but getting rid of Vaporeon was the major roadblock. And yeah, he also just plots up, so he's definitely saying he is Sash here. And switching into Deancey on this turn does not, you know, net you anything. But, I mean, it was pretty over. Maybe it wasn't over. Oh, I did not mean to reset the whole battle. Let's get back to where we were. Yeah, as you can see, there were a lot of turns that we passed there. I want to get back to where Lazzle's out. Yeah, so here's Lazzle. So he goes Guzzlord, gets Sludge Bombed. And we'll have to wait for the replay thing to catch up. So he Sludge Bombs here. My guess is he switched because he doesn't have EQ and didn't think Knock would do meaningful damage. But like, if you Knock and get rid of the Sash, you could then go Diancie the next turn. You know? There's even a chance, I think, that you live +2 Sludge Bomb. And if he's not Dragon Pulse, then your Guzzlord actually might just beat Lazzle. Huh. And I mean, yeah, at this point, okay, he was D-Pulse. But unboosted wouldn't have KO'd, so I think yeah, I think you stay in and knock, and then you try to get Diancie back out. The game is still pretty rough from that point. So, well, let's think this through. So he has these 4, Confides 4 that he has left, showing here what he has. I guess we can just go back to last turn again. So, Guzzlord, if he knocks on this turn, yeah, the poison sucks, sure, but if you knock here, you get rid of the Sash, this thing can plot up, you don't care too much. I think you still just sack Guzz, maybe, you know, what if he overpredicts and goes for Sludge Bomb or something, I don't know. Regardless, assume you just give up Guzzlord. Diancie will always revenge kill. At the very least, you force it out. I guess, I think the main worry, regardless at this point, would be if you're Rob Jr. Or, I think the main issue is just how do you stop Spec Sylveon from claiming repeatedly? Like, Tauros is not winning you this game on its own, I don't think. I think you have enough sacks. So maybe this, like, theoretical playing out of the game from, you know, the stance of he knocks the Lazzle instead of going Diancie as it plots up. Might just be that it wastes, like, another 5 turns. Or you get, like, an extra 5 turns to pretend like you have a shot at winning. I don't know. I think that probably would have been a bit better of an endgame. You know, like, I'm not too sure what switching there accomplishes, personally. But, you know. I'm not convinced it actually mattered that much anyway. That's gonna be it for this week of SCL. The 2 uses of sand, I guess not, you know, one was quote-unquote full sand, the other was just the little sand core, and then just kind of like standard-looking balance-esque stuff. I do want to see more experimentation with sand going forward, if only because I think it is an interesting offense archetype that's got some decent potential. Like, yeah, there are some annoying blocks to it in the meta, sure. I mean, Vaporeon is at least moderately annoying to KO, you need chip on it. And while there aren't many ground types, one of them is the horse. The horse is not an easy one to get by. But I don't think these are matchups where you just look at it and you go, wow, this is going to be very hard. I think they're pretty winnable. Like, I think +2 Sandslash with Life Orb probably beats Mudstill. And then, of course, even... Oh, my lord. Oh, I am tired. But even outside of Sand, you still have, like, fine speed control options, just like priority, potential Scarf on Rotom C, things like that. There are a lot of pivots that you can pair with the really good Sand, with the breakers you see on Sand to get them in and make up for how frail they are too. I don't know. I do think that these 2 games though that we saw that used Sand in some way were pretty cool in just showing the options you have. But that's good. Wow. I hope the music was not too loud during this, because right now it is blaring. I'll put it right there for now just to end this video. Anyhow, I hope y'all enjoyed. If the music was too loud, man, I just hope I was speaking loud enough to be over it. My throat hurts. I'm gonna go chill now. I hope y'all enjoy your day, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.